My name is Hannah Williams. I'm 32 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought I had finally landed in the safest chapter of my life. I work in healthcare administration. Structured hours, predictable stress, nothing glamorous. My boyfriend, Mark Reynolds, is the opposite. He's an ICU nurse at one of the busiest hospitals in the city. We met 3 years ago, moved in together last summer, and had started talking seriously about marriage. Not in the Pinterest board way, in the quiet, adult way. Venues bookmarked, guest lists half argued over, a future that felt solid. One of the things I loved most about Mark was his dedication to his patients. He talked about them with this calm intensity, like every life mattered equally. He picked up extra shifts without complaining. Missed dinners, missed birthdays, missed sleep. I admired that. I still do, in a way. But about 2 months ago, something shifted. It started small. A dinner canceled here. A movie night postponed there. Emergency call-in, he'd text. Massive trauma coming in. All hands on deck. I'm sorry, babe. I believed him. Of course I did. I'd watched him come home exhausted before. Scrubs smelling like antiseptic, eyes hollow, hands shaking from adrenaline. I knew what real emergencies look like. But these new ones felt different. The texts always came late. Always just an hour before plans. Always detailed enough to sound convincing, but never followed by anything. No venting, no decompression, just silence. I'd offer to bring him food, coffee, anything. Too chaotic, he'd reply. No visitors allowed tonight. And then nothing until early morning. At first, I told myself I was being selfish. People were dying. Who was I to complain about a lonely couch and cold leftovers? But the timing nagged at me. The frequency. 2, sometimes 3 nights a week. Always evenings. Always emergencies dramatic enough to override our plans. What bothered me most wasn't the cancellations. It was how easy they seemed for him. He stopped apologizing, stopped explaining, started assuming I'd understand. We'd sit across from each other in the morning, sipping coffee, him calm and collected, me running on 4 hours of sleep and a quiet ache I couldn't name. You okay? He'd ask casually. Yeah, I'd lie. Just tired. He never noticed that I'd stopped talking about wedding ideas, or that I'd stopped asking about his patients. I didn't want to be the girlfriend who doubted a man saving lives. But somewhere between the 3rd mass casualty and the 5th ruined plan, a thought crept in that scared me more than suspicion. What if I wasn't being paranoid? What if I was being slowly edited out of my own relationship? The next time Mark texted about an emergency shift, I didn't respond right away. I just stared at my phone, heart thudding, and thought, next time, I need to see this for myself. The next emergency came sooner than I expected. It was a Friday. Of course it was. We'd been planning that night for weeks. Nothing fancy, just takeout and sitting on the floor with our laptops, finally locking down a venue shortlist. Mark had even circled the date on the kitchen calendar in red. At 6:04 p.m., my phone buzzed. Babe, I'm so sorry. Multi-trauma coming in by helicopter. Going to be here all night. Love you. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Normally, I would have replied instantly with some variation of I understand or be safe. This time, something about the wording felt hollow, polished, like a script he'd used too many times already. I typed, deleted, typed again. Okay, I'll save you some dinner. No response. By 8:30 p.m., the apartment felt too quiet. The food sat untouched on the counter. I kept replaying his text in my head, picking at it like a loose thread. So I did something I'd never done before. I grabbed my keys. I told myself I wasn't checking up on him. I was being supportive. ICU nurses didn't get breaks. If I could drop off coffee and sandwiches, maybe I'd make his night easier. The hospital parking garage was usually a nightmare on Friday evenings. That night, it was almost empty. I slowed my car, scanning the levels, rows and rows of vacant spaces. No clusters of staff cars, no signs of an emergency surge. That's when I noticed it. A silver sedan parked alone in the reserved section near the elevators. I didn't recognize it. I shook the thought off and parked anyway, my stomach tightening for reasons I couldn't explain. The elevator ride felt endless. Every floor that ticked by made my chest feel heavier. I was bracing for chaos. Gurneys, raised voices that controlled panic hospitals get during real emergencies. Instead, the ICU floor was calm. Too calm. 2 nurses sat at the desk, chatting quietly while doing paperwork. No rushing, no urgency, just the steady hum of fluorescent lights. I walked up, suddenly aware of how out of place I felt holding a thermos and a paper bag. Hi, I said, I'm looking for Mark Reynolds. The charge nurse frowned slightly. Mark? Yes. He texted that he was called in for a trauma. She checked the computer, then looked back at me, puzzled. Oh, he clocked out around 6:30, said he had plans tonight. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. Sorry, are you sure? She nodded. Yeah, he was only here briefly. The room tilted. I mumbled something about getting my times mixed up and backed away before she could ask if I was okay. I don't remember the walk back to the elevator, just the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. In the garage, I stood next to my car, breathing too fast. That's when I heard my name. Hannah? I turned and saw Rick, one of the hospital security guards I'd chatted with before during tours and fundraisers. Looking for Mark? He asked casually. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Guess I missed him. Rick hesitated, then shrugged. Yeah, he left a while ago. Funny thing, though. He stopped himself. What? I asked. Rick lowered his voice. I probably shouldn't say anything, but I've noticed a pattern lately. He swipes in, stays maybe 10 minutes, then heads back out. Been happening a lot. The words landed like ice water. Are you sure? I whispered. He nodded. Hard not to notice. I thanked him and got into my car, hands shaking so badly I had to sit there for a minute before turning the key. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I opened my phone. We'd shared locations months ago. Safety thing? Nothing dramatic. I'd never once checked his without asking. Until now. The map loaded. Mark wasn't at the hospital. He was at a restaurant downtown. I stared at the screen, my mind scrambling for explanations. Maybe he'd gone to grab food. Maybe there'd been a mistake. Maybe... I texted him. Hey, love, how's the emergency going? 3 hours passed. At 11:42 p.m., he replied. Exhausting night. Finally catching a breath. Be home around 2. He walked in at 1:47 a.m. I watched him from the couch as he set his bag down. Calm, unhurried. He looked tired, but not wrecked. Not hollowed out by trauma. He smelled faintly of wine and a perfume I didn't own. How was it? I asked, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. He didn't hesitate. Rough. Lost 2 patients. I don't really want to talk about it. Perfect delivery. Controlled sadness. Just enough distance. I nodded, because if I didn't, I thought I might scream. I lay awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying. Either the man I loved was lying to me with professional precision, or I didn't know him at all anymore. The worst part wasn't the lying. It was how normal everything still looked. Mark still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still asked about my day, still laughed at the same stupid shows we used to watch together. If I hadn't been inside that parking garage, hadn't seen that empty ICU desk, I might have convinced myself I imagined it all. So I stopped reacting. Instead, I started watching. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to know if I was unraveling, or if my instincts were finally catching up to reality. Over the next 3 weeks, the pattern became impossible to ignore. 2 to 3 emergency call-ins a week. Always evenings. Always last minute. Always dramatic. And always followed by silence. But he never came home the way he used to after real shifts. No antiseptic smell. No stiff shoulders from hours on his feet. Sometimes his hair was styled differently than when he'd left. That detail haunted me more than anything else. The breakthrough came from someone I trusted completely. Daniel Perez, a college friend of mine who now worked in the hospital's IT department. We met for drinks one night, and I danced around the subject at first, asking casual questions about overtime systems, staffing logs, how emergency call-ins were tracked. Daniel laughed. Everything's logged, for insurance, audits, payroll, especially ICU. You can't just disappear into an emergency without a paper trail. My chest tightened. I told him the truth. The parking garage, the security guard, the texts. Daniel went quiet. Hannah, he said slowly, there haven't been any major trauma events in the last 6 weeks. No helicopter arrivals, no mass casualties. The biggest thing was a single cardiac arrest last Tuesday. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of lies. Then he added something that made my blood run cold. That silver sedan you mentioned, I know it. It belongs to Emily Carter. The name meant nothing to me at first. She's a medical equipment sales rep, Daniel continued. Comes through the hospital all the time. Vendor meetings, late visits. I swallowed. Do you know her? He hesitated, only because she used to date Mark, a few years back. The room felt too small. Mark's ex-girlfriend. I didn't cry. Not yet. I went numb instead. The following Wednesday, Mark sent the now familiar message. Multi-car accident, going to be a long night. I waited an hour. Then I drove to the hospital. His car wasn't in the employee lot. The silver sedan was parked in the visitor section. I parked across the street, heart pounding, and waited. At 11:28 p.m., I saw them. Mark walked out first, relaxed, jacket slung over his shoulder, Emily followed, laughing, her hand brushing his arm. They stopped near the car. He rested his hand on her lower back like it belonged there. Then they kissed. Not a quick mistake, not a goodbye peck. A kiss you don't give someone you're unsure about. I sat frozen, fingers digging into the steering wheel. They drove off together. I followed at a distance, every red light stretching my nerves thinner. They pulled into a quiet restaurant about 20 minutes away. Through the window, I saw them seated close, hands intertwined across the table. Mark looked happy, not the exhausted man who stumbled through our door at 2 a.m. Happy. I stayed there for nearly 2 hours, watching my life fracture in real time. At 1:45 a.m., my phone buzzed. Just finished, patient stabilized, heading home. When he walked in 15 minutes later, he transformed seamlessly, loosening his shoulders, rubbing his eyes, softening his voice. "How was your night?" he asked, kissing my forehead. I smiled. "Fine," I said. "How about the accident victims?" "Touch and go," he replied easily, "but they'll make it." That was the moment I understood. This wasn't an affair born of weakness. This was a system, a double life built on precision, timing, and my trust. And if I didn't end it on my terms, it would destroy me quietly. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Every text Mark sent after that felt rehearsed. Every touch felt borrowed. I started noticing how carefully he managed his time, how nothing overlapped, how every lie had a backup explanation already prepared. I realized something chilling. He wasn't reckless. He was methodical. For the next week, I lived in a strange parallel reality. Publicly, we were still the solid couple everyone admired. Privately, I was documenting my own heartbreak like a case file. Screenshots of his emergency texts, photos of empty parking garages, dates and times written in a notebook I kept hidden under my work files. Not because I wanted revenge, because I needed proof I wasn't crazy. Meanwhile, the wedding conversations intensified. His mother called to ask about guest counts. My aunt texted venue recommendations. Mark joked about honeymoon destinations while brushing his teeth beside me. I watched him perform devotion with terrifying ease. One night, I finally asked, "Are you okay? You've been working a lot." He smiled softly. "It'll slow down after this month, I promise." Another lie, delivered gently. I considered confronting him privately, just ending it quietly and walking away. That would have been easier, cleaner. But then I heard him on the phone with his parents. "Oh yeah," he said casually, laughing. "Hannah's been so understanding about the emergency shifts. I'm lucky." Lucky. The word burned. He wasn't just betraying me. He was using my loyalty as part of the cover story. That's when I made my decision. If he could lie publicly for months, then the truth deserved daylight. The engagement party was scheduled for the following Saturday. Both families flying in, deposits paid, a room full of people celebrating a love story that didn't exist. The night before the party, I asked him directly. "Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, "are you seeing someone else?" The color drained from his face, just for a second. Then the mask snapped back into place. "What? Hannah, where is this coming from?" "Just answer me," he scoffed. "Of course not. You know how insane work's been." That was all I needed. No apology, no hesitation, just instinctive denial. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, greeting relatives, hugging my parents, soaking in congratulations, like he'd earned them. At dinner, his uncle leaned toward me and whispered, "You must be so proud of how dedicated Mark is. All those late-night emergencies." I smiled. Inside, something snapped cleanly in half. When it came time for toasts, Mark squeezed my hand. I stood up instead. "Thank you all for being here," I said, scanning the room. "Family means everything to me, and honesty, real honesty, is the foundation of any lasting relationship." Mark's smile faltered. "I want to especially thank someone who's been supporting Mark through all those emergency shifts lately." A hush fell. "Emily Carter." His face went white. "I know you're not here tonight," I continued calmly, pulling my phone from my pocket, "but your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed." Gasps rippled through the room as I held up the photos, him and Emily at the restaurant. The time-stamped messages, the empty ICU schedules. "These emergencies," I said, my voice steady, "never happened." Mark stood abruptly. "Hannah, stop." I didn't. For months, while I thought my boyfriend was saving lives, he was living a second one. Silence exploded into chaos. Mark's mother began to cry. His father stared at him in disbelief. "Is this true?" someone demanded. Mark looked at me, eyes wild. "You're humiliating me." "No," I said quietly. "I'm freeing myself." He left. Emily never showed. The party fractured, but something else took its place. Clarity. That night, I packed my things and walked out without looking back. Because some lies don't deserve closure. They deserve consequences. The silence after the party was louder than the confrontation itself. By the next morning, my phone was full. Missed calls, unread messages, voicemails, stacked like accusations. Mark, his parents, mutual friends who didn't know which side they were supposed to be on yet. I didn't answer any of them. I stayed at my sister's place that night, lying awake on a couch that smelled like laundry detergent and safety. For the first time in months, no one texted me about emergencies. No one canceled plans. No one asked me to be understanding. The calm felt unreal. Mark finally cornered me 2 days later. He showed up outside my office, eyes red, voice trembling just enough to sound sincere to anyone who didn't know him the way I did. "Hannah, please," he said, "can we just talk?" I crossed my arms. Talk or lie? That cut deeper than anything I'd said at the party. He tried everything. Denial first, claiming I misunderstood, that Emily was just a mistake. Then anger, accusing me of spying, of humiliating him. Finally, bargaining. "We can fix this," he said desperately. "I ended it. I choose you." I looked at him, really looked at him. "You didn't choose me," I said quietly. "You chose convenience. I was just part of the schedule." That's when the truth slipped out. The affair hadn't started recently. It had begun just weeks after we started talking seriously about marriage. Emily had been familiar, easy, no expectations, no future questions. And the emergencies? They were the only excuse that always worked, he admitted. That was it. No remorse, just strategy. I told him the engagement was over, that the apartment was mine until the lease ended, that any further contact would go through my lawyer. He stared at me like he couldn't believe I'd stopped negotiating. The consequences came fast after that. Word traveled quickly in healthcare circles. Mark's supervisors started asking questions about badge swipes, overtime logs, vendor boundaries. Emily's company quietly removed her from hospital accounts. No one announced anything publicly, but doors began closing. I didn't celebrate that. I just felt lighter. 3 weeks later, I returned the ring by certified mail with a short note for Emily, since she already had the evenings. Petty? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. I blocked his number after that. Blocked Emily's too, though she never tried to contact me. Cowards rarely do. Now, months later, I sleep through the night again. I make plans without bracing for cancellation. I trust my instincts in a way I never did before. Looking back, I realize something that still chills me. Mark didn't just cheat. He rehearsed compassion while practicing deception. He lied with the same calm voice he used to comfort patients' families. And I refused to build a life with someone capable of that. I didn't lose a future. I escaped one that would have slowly erased me. 3 weeks after everything ended, I woke up one morning and realized something strange. I wasn't angry, not numb, not hollow, just clear. The apartment was quiet in a way that no longer felt lonely. Sunlight spilled across the floor where Mark's shoes used to sit. I made coffee without checking my phone, without waiting for an apology that would never come. The fallout had mostly settled by then. Mark tried one last time to reach me. An email sent from a new address, carefully worded, full of regret-adjacent phrases. He said he was in therapy, that he finally understood what he'd risked, that he hoped someday I could forgive him. I didn't reply. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes it just requires distance. Friends filled in the gaps I hadn't realized had been widening for months. My sister started coming over on Sundays. My parents stopped tiptoeing around the subject and started trusting that I was actually okay. And I was. What surprised me most was how quickly the shame faded. For weeks after the party, I worried people would remember me as the woman who exposed her boyfriend in front of everyone. The dramatic one. The vengeful one. But that's not how the story stuck. People remembered the truth. They remembered how calm I was, how factual, how I didn't scream or cry or beg. I didn't need to. The lies spoke loudly enough on their own. One of Mark's coworkers reached out anonymously to thank me. Apparently, I wasn't the first woman to be confused by his emergency shifts, just the first to connect all the dots. That knowledge didn't feel validating. It felt sobering. I thought a lot about love after that, about how easy it is to confuse loyalty with silence, support with self-erasure. I thought about all the nights I sat alone, convincing myself I was being understanding, when really I was being slowly trained not to ask questions. The scariest part wasn't that Mark lied. It was how much effort he put into making the lies believable. I used to think trust was about giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Now I know it's also about listening to the quiet voice that asks, why doesn't this feel right anymore? I didn't lose my future when that relationship ended. I reclaimed my sense of reality. And once you get that back, you don't ever give it away again.